Fluorescent lights didn't simply buzz, they ground against the nerves. Their cold white glare seemed to scrape across exhausted eyes, turning every passing minute into another small act of endurance. By the 11th hour of her shift, Bridget could barely distinguish the sharp scent of industrial disinfectant from the lingering odor of stale vomit drifting through Oak Ridge Memorial's emergency department. Somewhere behind her, muffled laughter floated from the nurse's station. She ignored it. They believed she was incompetent. They had no idea she was simply trying to forget the desert. The Pyxis medication dispenser stood in the cramped medication room like an oversized vending machine trusted with life-saving drugs. Bridget hated it almost as much as it hated her. She pressed her right thumb against the glowing green biometric scanner. Access denied. Please try again. The machine emitted a soft electronic chime that somehow sounded smug. Bridget sighed, wiped her thumb against the stiff fabric of her scrub pants, still carrying the faint scent of bleach and iron, and tried again. Access denied. You have to press gently, Bridget. The familiar voice came from the doorway. Bridget didn't bother turning around. Diane, the charge nurse, wore bright cartoon character scrub tops, orthopedic clogs, and carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. 20 years in civilian emergency medicine had convinced her that anyone with less experience needed constant supervision. It's a scanner. Diane continued as she stepped inside, casually nudging Bridget aside with her hip. Not a detonator. You don't have to wrestle it. She placed one perfectly manicured finger on the scanner. The drawer slid open instantly, with a cheerful click. There, Diane said, retrieving a vial of Dilaudid before handing it over. See, finesse. You're way too rigid. She smiled with practiced condescension. This isn't boot camp, sweetie. It's an emergency room. You need to soften up. Bridget accepted the medication without meeting her eyes. She didn't explain that the scanner rejected her because most of the friction ridges on her thumb had been burned away by a piece of white-hot shrapnel outside Kandahar years earlier. She simply nodded. Thanks, Diane. That single word cost less energy than telling the truth. As Bridget stepped back onto the bustling air floor, Diane lowered her voice, though not enough. I honestly don't know who pushed her through HR. Diane whispered to Ashley, one of the newest nurses. She's so slow. Ashley snorted. It took her forever just to figure out Epic yesterday. And her bedside manner? Diane continued. Good grief. She actually told the guy in bed 4 to stop complaining because at least his leg was still attached. Ashley burst into laughter. The sound cut cleanly through the steady chorus of cardiac monitors. Yesterday she asked me where we kept the tourniquets, Ashley added. So I handed her one of the blue rubber ones, and she stared at me like I'd handed her garbage. More laughter. What else would she expect us to use? Bridget kept walking. She didn't slow down. She didn't speed up. She simply pushed a squeaky for a pole toward room 6, her face unreadable. Civilian medicine was a different battlefield. Everything revolved around computer menus, insurance codes, customer satisfaction scores, and smiling pane charts covered with cartoon faces. None of it made sense to her. For 8 years, Bridget had served as a Navy hospital corpsman. She had packed shattered pelvises inside dark medevac helicopters, while bullets punched holes through aluminum walls. She could recognize the smell of a tension pneumothorax before anyone else noticed the patient's oxygen saturation dropping. She had kept 3 Marines alive with nothing but a trauma bag, combat gauze, and the refusal to let them die. Out there, hesitation killed. Here, forgetting a billing code earned disapproving looks. Inside Oak Ridge Memorial, she wasn't respected. She was the quiet veteran who couldn't remember insurance documentation, the awkward transfer nurse who struggled with hospital software, the diversity hire from the hospital's Veteran Employment Initiative that administrators proudly showcased on social media. No one saw the medic she had once been. Bridget pulled back the curtain to room 6. A middle-aged man writhed across the bed, clutching his side. My kidney feels like it's exploding, he groaned. I have your pain medication, Bridget said evenly. Her voice carried none of the syrupy customer service enthusiasm Diane constantly demanded. She verified the patient's wristband, cleaned the 4-port, flushed the line, and slowly administered the Dilaudid with calm, practiced precision. The man glared at her. About time. I've been hitting that call button forever. You people are useless. Bridget finished flushing the line before answering. It has been a long wait. Her tone remained steady. The medication should begin working within a few minutes. She secured the 4 tubing. Try taking slow, steady breaths while it starts to take effect. She didn't apologize. Not because she lacked compassion, because apologizing for circumstances beyond her control had never saved a life. In Afghanistan, no one cared how comforting your voice sounded. They cared whether the bleeding stopped. And some habits survived every battlefield. Apologizing meant someone had made a mistake. Bridget didn't believe she had. When she had received 2 call lights at the same time, she chose the patient in room 2 suffering an acute myocardial infarction over the man with the kidney stone. In triage, the priorities were simple. Airway before breathing. Breathing before circulation. Circulation before pain. Blood always beat stones. It wasn't cruel. It was medicine. But Oak Ridge Memorial didn't always operate on medical logic. It ran on patient satisfaction surveys, scripted empathy, and making people feel heard. Bridget returned to the nurse's station and sat in front of a computer to document the medication she had given. The electronic chart glowed at her like an enemy she still hadn't learned to defeat. Tabs, subtabs, mandatory boxes, spiritual needs, dietary preferences, fall risk reassessments. She navigated through the endless menus with scarred hands that felt better suited for tourniquets than computer mice. Bridget. She looked up. Dr. Hayes, a second-year attending physician, stood beside the counter with a stainless steel tumbler in one hand. His perfectly styled hair looked untouched despite the 12-hour shift. "Did you update the whiteboards in your patient rooms?" he asked casually. "No, doctor," Bridget answered without looking away from the screen. "I was administering medications." "Right." He nodded as though speaking to a student. "But the whiteboards matter. Patients like knowing who's taking care of them. It helps build trust." He tapped his pen lightly against the counter. "And another thing, you're charting." Bridget stopped typing. "It's very brief," Hayes continued. "Instead of writing, bleeding controlled, vital stable. Try adding more detail. Describe the wound edges. Mention the patient's emotional state. Paint a clearer clinical picture." For a long second, Bridget simply stared at him. Something tightened deep inside her chest. A familiar knot of anger mixed with exhaustion, so complete it felt physical. She wanted to grab him by the front of his spotless white coat and tell him what real trauma medicine looked like. On a battlefield, nobody cared whether the wound margins were cleanly documented. If blood was pouring onto the ground, you stopped it. If someone couldn't breathe, you opened an airway. You didn't ask a dying Marine how he felt about the experience. Instead, Bridget swallowed every word. "Understood, Dr. Hayes. I'll update the whiteboards." She stood and walked away. Behind her, Ashley's voice floated across the station. "Robot," she muttered before pretending to cough into her hand. A few quiet chuckles followed. Bridget didn't react. She headed toward the supply closet, opened the heavy door, and stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by a single overhead bulb. Shelves packed with gauze for kits and cardboard boxes surrounded her in silent rows. She closed the door. The noise of the emergency department faded into a distant murmur. Bridget leaned against the wall before slowly sliding to the floor. She wrapped her arms around her knees. For several moments, she simply breathed. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She never had been. She only wanted a steady paycheck, a quiet apartment, a cat waiting by the door, a cheap glass of whiskey at the end of every shift until the memories finally became quiet enough to sleep. Instead, every day in this hospital made her feel more useless than the last. She looked down at her hands, calloused, scarred, strong enough to compress a hemorrhaging artery, steady enough to insert a chest tube inside a moving helicopter, yet somehow too clumsy for electronic charting and smiling customer service. Maybe they're right, she thought. Maybe I don't belong here. The afternoon lull settled over Oak Ridge Memorial just after 2 o'clock. The waiting room remained crowded with sprained ankles, stubborn coughs, and vague abdominal pain, but the trauma bays sat unusually quiet. Bridget found comfort in routine. She stood inside Trauma Bay 1, carefully restocking for tubing. Crack open the plastic wrapper. Stack the tubing. Reach for another. Repeat. The rhythm calmed her racing thoughts. Then the red phone rang. Not the ordinary digital chirp of the hospital switchboard. A sharp mechanical bell echoed across the department. The EMS dispatch line. Every conversation stopped. At the front desk, Diane answered the phone with practiced indifference. Oak Ridge Emergency Department. Charge nurse speaking. She listened. For only a second. Bridget watched Diane's expression change through the glass. The boredom disappeared. Color drained from her face. Her shoulders stiffened. She gripped the receiver tighter. "Wait," Diane said. Her voice suddenly strained. "Slow down." The panic in her tone carried across the entire emergency department. Every nurse looked up. Every conversation ended. Something catastrophic was coming. "You can't divert here." Diane shouted into the phone. "Harborview is a level 1 trauma center. We're only a level 3. We don't have a cardiothoracic surgeon on call." Dr. Hayes looked up from his charting. Ashley and Chloe immediately stopped gossiping. The atmosphere in the emergency department changed in an instant. The casual chatter disappeared, replaced by the heavy silence that settles just before disaster arrives. "I don't care about the weather," Diane yelled, her voice growing sharper. "We're not equipped for this. We don't have a massive transfusion protocol ready for injuries like that. You have to divert." Frustrated, she slammed her hand onto the console, accidentally activating the speakerphone. The emergency department filled with loud bursts of static. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The unmistakable rhythm of helicopter rotors echoed through the room. It wasn't distant. It was close. Very close. A strained voice broke through the interference. "Oak Ridge, this is Coast Guard Rescue 4 Tango. Harborview's helipad is completely socked in with zero visibility. We're running low on fuel, and our patient is crashing. We have no other option." A brief burst of static followed. "We're landing on your roof. Clear the pad." Dr. Hayes' pen slipped from his fingers. "A helicopter," he whispered. "Our helipad hasn't been certified in 2 years. The freight elevator barely works." Diane grabbed the microphone. "Rescue 4 Tango. Report patient status." The reply came immediately. 24-year-old male. Commercial fishing accident. Right lower leg partially amputated after being caught in the winch cable. Massive crush injury to the chest. We've applied 2 tourniquets, but they're slipping. The medic paused only long enough to catch a breath. Heart rate 140. Blood pressure 70 systolic. We're losing him. Hayes looked at Diane, panic spreading across his face. He's bleeding out. "We don't even keep O-negative blood in the ER," he muttered. "Everything's downstairs in the blood bank." "And if that chest injury is as bad as they say?" His voice faded. Diane squeezed the radio microphone. "I can't authorize this," she shouted. "You're bringing us a patient we can't save." The helicopter crew answered instantly. The pilot sounded exhausted, his words nearly drowned out by the pounding rotors. Oak Ridge listened carefully. "I have a Navy search and rescue medic in the cabin, doing everything humanly possible. But we're out of hands, and we're out of time." Then came the question that froze the entire department. "Is Bridget there?" Silence. Every conversation stopped. Even the cardiac monitors seemed quieter. Diane stared at the speaker. "What? Is Bridget Sullivan there?" The pilot repeated. "Call sign Stitch. Our flight manifest says she works at Oak Ridge now." His voice rose with urgency. "Get her on this radio. Now." Across Trauma Bay 1, Bridget stood perfectly still. A cold chill crawled up the back of her neck. Her stomach dropped. One word had shattered years of carefully built distance. Stitch. No one had called her that since a dusty evacuation flight over Helmand Province. Slowly, she stepped out of the trauma bay. Each footstep echoed across the suddenly silent emergency department. The squeak of her rubber soles was the only sound anyone could hear. Diane turned. Dr. Hayes turned. Ashley, Chloe, Every pair of eyes followed Bridget as she walked toward the nurse's station, her face calm, unreadable, and carrying the quiet weight of a past none of them had ever imagined. The staff stared at Bridget as though they were seeing her for the first time. She didn't acknowledge a single one of them. Her attention stayed fixed on the black radio console. She reached for the microphone. Her hand was perfectly steady. The awkward nurse who struggled with the Pyxis machine and fumbled through electronic charting disappeared in an instant. The hesitation was gone. Only confidence remained. Bridget pressed the transmit button, her scarred thumb gripping the microphone. "This is Sullivan," she said. Her voice had changed. It was no longer quiet or uncertain. It was low, calm, and edged with absolute authority. A voice burst through the static. "Bridget. Thank God." Relief flooded every word. "It's Miller. Marcus Miller. I'm flying right seat." Bridget's eyes narrowed. Marcus Miller. Years ago, they had flown countless medical evacuations together out of Camp Bastion. "Talk to me, Miller." The command came instantly. "The patient's bleeding through both tourniquets." Miller shouted over the roar of the helicopter. "The femoral artery has retracted. We can't get a clamp on it with this turbulence. Massive crush injury to the chest. Breath sounds are almost gone on the right side." His voice cracked. "He's drowning in his own blood, Bridget." Everything around her disappeared. The fluorescent lights, the computer terminals, the whispered gossip. Oak Ridge Memorial vanished. She wasn't a civilian emergency nurse anymore. She was hospital corpsman first-class Bridget Sullivan. Her mind locked onto the problem with crystal-clear focus. "He has a tension pneumothorax," she said immediately. "Miller, tell your medic to decompress the right chest. Use a 14-gauge needle." "He already tried." Miller shouted. The needle bent. His chest wall's too thick. Muscle spasms keep throwing him off. Bridget answered without hesitation. "Then perform a finger thoracostomy." The room froze. Fifth intercostal space, mid-axillary line. Make the incision. Bluntly dissect with a hemostat. Then insert a finger into the pleural space. Her voice remained calm. "Do it now. If you wait until landing, he'll never make it." Dr. Hayes stepped forward, visibly shaken. "Bridget, you can't direct a surgical procedure over the radio. That's completely outside hospital protocol." She slowly turned toward him. The look in her eyes stopped him cold. There was no uncertainty left. No exhaustion. No quiet obedience. Only the hard expression of someone who had spent years making life-or-death decisions under fire. Hayes instinctively took a step backward. "Be quiet," Bridget said evenly. Then she returned to the radio. "Miller." The answer came immediately. "We're directly overhead." The thunder of helicopter blades suddenly became deafening. Thump, thump, thump. The windows rattled. Ceiling dust drifted onto the floor. The entire emergency department vibrated beneath the approaching aircraft. Bridget lowered the microphone and turned toward the stunned staff. Her voice carried across the room with effortless authority. "Diane." The charge nurse looked up automatically. "Call the blood bank. I need 6 units of O-negative blood and 4 units of plasma waiting upstairs. If the elevator's too slow, have someone carry them." "Do you do it now?" Ashley stared blankly. Bridget pointed toward her. "Get the rapid transfusion infuser ready." Ashley swallowed. I don't know where the tubing is." Bridget's voice cracked across the room like a whip. "Then find it. If you can't, move aside and let someone who can." No one laughed. No one whispered. Every person in the emergency department moved. For the first time since Bridget had arrived at Oak Ridge Memorial, no one saw an awkward new nurse. They saw the combat medic who had just taken command. Hayes stood frozen beneath the vibrating ceiling as the deep, concussive roar of helicopter rotors shook the entire hospital. Ceiling panels rattled. Dust drifted from the fluorescent fixtures. Every heavy pulse of the blades seemed to hammer straight through the concrete structure. Bridget turned toward him. Her expression was calm again. Not gentle. Calm in the terrifying way only someone completely in control could be. "Hayes." He looked at her, grabbed the rapid infuser, a chest tube tray, and 3 combat application tourniquets. She was already moving toward the freight elevator. "Meet me upstairs." He blinked in disbelief. "We're not a trauma center," he stammered. "We can't handle something like this." Bridget never slowed. "We are today." Those 3 words landed harder than a shout. She disappeared down the corridor at a sprint. Moments later, the freight elevator groaned upward toward the roof. The aging steel cab smelled faintly of floor wax, machine oil, and overheated electrical wiring. No one spoke. Hayes stood beside Bridget, clutching the sterile chest tube tray so tightly the plastic edges dug into his palms. His knuckles had turned white. He stared at the elevator doors as though they might open into a nightmare. Finally, he broke the silence. "I've never treated a patient like this outside an operating room." His voice sounded almost childlike. "I've never done anything this severe without a full surgical team." Bridget kept her eyes on the glowing floor indicator. "You aren't leading the procedure." She spoke evenly. "When I tell you to apply pressure, you apply pressure. When I tell you to hold something, you don't let go. If you stop before I tell you." She looked at him for the first time. "He dies." Hayes swallowed hard. "I understand." The elevator jolted to a stop. The door slid open. The noise hit them like a physical force. The Coast Guard rescue helicopter had already settled onto the neglected rooftop pad. Its massive rotor blades churned the air into a violent storm. Wind blasted across the roof, driving loose gravel and dust into their faces. The sharp smell of aviation fuel filled the air, while rain clouds rolled across the darkening sky. Bridget lowered her head against the rotor wash and ran. Hayes stumbled after her, struggling to keep his footing as his white coat whipped wildly around his legs. The helicopter's side door stood open. Inside, it looked less like a rescue aircraft than a battlefield. Blood covered the metal floor. It collected inside every groove of the deck plating, turning the cabin into a slick crimson maze. A young Coast Guard rescue medic knelt over the patient. His uniform was soaked almost to the shoulders. He looked up as Bridget climbed aboard. Stitch. Relief flashed across his exhausted face. He didn't ask why she was there. He didn't question her authority. In this cabin, experience mattered more than job titles. Bridget dropped to her knees beside the patient. He couldn't have been older than 22. His skin had gone ghostly pale beneath a sheen of cold sweat. His lips were turning blue. Each desperate breath sounded wet and shallow, as though his lungs could no longer keep up with his body's fight to survive. "What do we have?" Bridget asked. "Massive blood loss," Gomez answered immediately. "Chest trauma. Pressure keeps dropping." Bridget's eyes moved instantly to the right leg. The industrial winch cable had shredded the upper thigh. 2 combat tourniquets were already tightened high on the limb. They had slowed the bleeding, but not stopped it. Blood had soaked the surrounding tissue, making the straps slide lower with every movement of the helicopter. Bright red blood continued pulsing from deep within the wound. Not fast, not forcefully, but enough. Enough to kill him. "Leg first," Bridget ordered. She reached back, grabbed Hayes by the sleeve, and pulled him into the helicopter. "You." Hayes stared at the mangled leg, his face draining of color. Bridget pointed firmly toward the patient's groin. "Put both fists here." She indicated the point where direct pressure could reduce blood flow toward the injury. "Lean your weight into it." Hayes hesitated. His breathing became shallow. Now, the command snapped him into motion. He dropped beside the patient and pressed down exactly where Bridget indicated. She adjusted his arms, forcing his elbows straight. "Don't move." She pushed more of his body weight forward. "You are the clamp now." Hayes nodded silently, every muscle shaking with effort. Satisfied that the bleeding had slowed, Bridget shifted her attention to the patient's chest. Gomez had already attempted an emergency decompression. The initial effort hadn't relieved enough pressure. The patient was still struggling for every breath. Bridget extended one hand. Chest tube tray. The sterile package was opened immediately and placed into her waiting hands. Around her, the helicopter thundered. Wind howled through the open cabin. No one spoke. Every second mattered. Every movement had only one purpose now: keeping the young man alive long enough to reach definitive surgical care. There was no time for hesitation. The young man was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and uneven, his pulse hanging by a thread. Bridget reached for the chest tube tray without a word. Her movements were deliberate, practiced, almost automatic. Years of battlefield medicine had stripped away every unnecessary motion. Around her, the helicopter continued to shudder beneath the pounding rhythm of the rotors, but she barely noticed. Her fingers located the anatomical landmarks along the patient's right side. "There," she murmured. She confirmed the correct position one final time before making the incision. Dark blood immediately welled into the opening. Without pausing, Bridget enlarged the access point just enough to continue. She carefully advanced a gloved finger through the opening, confirming the path before guiding the chest tube into place. Tube. Gomez already had it waiting. He placed the thick plastic tube into her hand. Using her finger as a guide, Bridget advanced it smoothly into the chest cavity until she was satisfied with its position. Clamp. Another instrument appeared instantly. The moment the tube was secured, trapped air and blood escaped through the drainage system with a forceful rush. The effect was immediate. The young fisherman gasped. His chest expanded more evenly. Color slowly began returning to his face. The frightening bluish tint around his lips faded into a pale but unmistakably healthier pink. "I've got a radial pulse," Gomez shouted, checking the patient's wrist again. "It's weak, but it's there." For the first time since the helicopter had landed, hope entered the cabin. Bridget exhaled once, only once. Then she turned her attention back to the rest of the patient. Across from her, Dr. Hayes remained exactly where she had left him. His arms trembled violently beneath the effort of maintaining pressure on the patient's upper thigh. Blood soaked his gloves, sleeves, and the front of his once pristine white coat. His breathing had become rapid. Sweat streamed down his face. "Hold your position," Bridget ordered. Her voice had returned to that calm, controlled tone that somehow carried more authority than shouting ever could. "We move him on my count." Hayes nodded without speaking. Seconds later, the trauma bay doors burst open. The stretcher rolled into Oak Ridge Memorial under harsh fluorescent lights, replacing the roar of helicopter turbines with the familiar chorus of monitors, pumps, and hurried footsteps. The transition from rooftop chaos to the bright, sterile emergency department was almost surreal. Bridget never lost her rhythm. Years of emergency medicine had trained her to focus only on the next problem. "Diane," she called. The charge nurse was already waiting. Gone was the condescending supervisor from earlier in the day. She stood beside a fully primed rapid transfusion system, every line prepared for immediate use. Ashley waited nearby, clutching units of O-negative blood with visibly shaking hands. The fear on her face had erased every trace of arrogance. "Let's move," Bridget commanded. The team responded instantly, O-negative wide open. Diane connected the blood products to the rapid infuser while Bridget secured the chest drainage system and confirmed it was functioning correctly. The collection chamber immediately began filling with blood from the injured lung. The rapid infuser hummed to life, delivering warm blood as quickly as the patient's circulation could tolerate. Bridget shifted to the injured leg. "Hayes." He looked up. "Ease off slowly." She positioned a heavy-duty pneumatic tourniquet high on the thigh before gradually transferring control from manual pressure to the device. The cuff tightened. The remaining bleeding stopped. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Hayes slowly released his hands. His arms dropped heavily to his sides. Only then did he notice himself. His white coat was completely stained with blood. His gloves were dark red. His hands shook uncontrollably. He stared at them as though they belonged to someone else. Without saying a word, he stepped backward until he reached the doorway. He leaned against a frame, struggling to steady his breathing. Across the room, Bridget continued working. No wasted motion, no panic, just one task after another. Nearly 20 minutes later, the doors to the ambulance entrance opened again. The critical care transport team from Harborview Medical Center rushed inside with specialized equipment designed for high-acuity transfers. Their lead physician, an older trauma surgeon with silver hair and tired eyes, approached the bedside. Bridget gave her report from memory. Age, mechanism of injury, vital signs, blood loss, interventions performed, response to treatment. blood products administered. She never glanced at a chart. Every detail remained organized in her mind. When she finished, the surgeon performed a rapid assessment. He examined the secured chest tube. He checked the hemorrhage control. He watched the monitor as the patient's blood pressure climbed higher than it had been since arrival. Finally, he looked back at Bridget. "Excellent work," he said quietly. "You bought him the time he needed. We'll take it from here." The Harborview team transferred the patient to their transport stretcher and disappeared through the doors. Silence settled over the emergency department. Not ordinary silence. The heavy, exhausted stillness that follows a life-or-death fight. The monitors quieted. The suction system gurgled softly before falling still. Bridget remained standing in the center of the now-empty trauma bay. Her scrubs clung heavily to her skin, soaked with sweat and blood. The metallic scent of iron mixed with disinfectant and floor wax until the familiar smell of combat medicine returned to her memory. Only then did the adrenaline begin to leave her body. Her heartbeat slowed. Her hands grew heavy. The exhaustion she'd held at bay came crashing back all at once. In the military, they had a name for that feeling. The combat crash. And it always arrived after the fighting was over. The military had a name for it. The combat crash. It was the moment your body finally realized you had survived. The danger was over. The mission was complete. And all the fear your mind had locked away came rushing back at once. Muscles that had been steady seconds earlier began to shake. Every heartbeat suddenly felt louder. Exhaustion settled into your bones like wet concrete. Bridget knew the feeling well. She walked slowly to the scrub sink in the corner of the trauma bay. Stepping on the foot pedal, she let a stream of hot water pour over her hands. The temperature was almost painful, but she barely noticed. She pumped antiseptic soap into her palms and scrubbed methodically. Blood swirled into the stainless steel basin, turning the water a deep crimson before fading to rusty pink, then finally disappearing altogether. She watched it spiral down the drain. She hated this part. She hated the smell of blood clinging to her skin. She hated how natural everything had felt only moments earlier. Most of all, she hated that she was so good at it. That was supposed to be behind her. She hadn't accepted a job at a quiet suburban emergency department because she missed battlefield medicine. She had come here hoping for ordinary patients, routine shifts, and problems that ended with discharge paperwork instead of helicopters. Yet somehow, chaos always managed to find her. A tremor crept into her left hand. She immediately gripped the edge of the metal sink until her knuckles whitened. Closing her eyes, she focused on the breathing exercise her VA therapist had taught her. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. Again, slowly. The shaking eased, but it never completely disappeared. The glass door slid open behind her. Bridget didn't turn around. Instead, she watched the reflection in the polished paper towel dispenser. Diane stepped quietly into the room. For the first time since Bridget had arrived at Oak Ridge Memorial, the charge nurse wasn't carrying a clipboard. Instead, she held a neatly folded stack of clean scrubs. Plain blue scrub pants. A fresh scrub top covered with cheerful cartoon characters. She placed them gently on the counter beside the sink. "I called environmental services," Diane said softly. "They're on their way to clean the trauma bay." Her voice sounded different. Not sharp, not impatient, just tired. Bridget reached for a paper towel and slowly dried her hands. "Thank you." Neither woman spoke for several seconds. Diane looked around the room. Empty blood bags rested beside the rapid infuser. Used wrappers covered the counters. The floor still carried faint reminders of the frantic fight that had taken place only minutes earlier. Then she looked back at Bridget. There was no dramatic apology, no emotional speech, only quiet respect. Something fundamental had changed. The invisible hierarchy that had ruled the emergency department for weeks had quietly disappeared. Finally, Diane cleared her throat. We didn't know." Bridget looked at her reflection. "Know what?" "That you were military medical." Bridget folded the paper towel and dropped it into the biohazard container. "I was a Navy hospital corpsman." She shrugged gently. "That was another life. I'm just an air nurse now." Diane gave a small nod. "I understand." She hesitated before speaking again. Take 15 minutes. I'll cover your patience. She managed the faintest smile. Oh, and Dr. Hayes is sitting in the break room. I think he's having a rough time. For the first time all day, Bridget almost smiled. I'll check on him later. Diane quietly slipped back out, letting the glass door close behind her. Bridget peeled off her blood-soaked scrubs and changed into the clean set. The cartoon-covered scrub top looked almost ridiculous after everything that had happened, but it was warm, dry. It smelled like fresh laundry instead of antiseptic and blood. She appreciated that more than she expected. When she stepped back onto the emergency department floor, life had already returned to normal. The waiting room was still crowded. Children cried. Someone coughed. A television played quietly in the corner. Sprained ankles, ear infections, minor cuts. The world had moved on. Then Bridget remembered. She still hadn't documented the pain medication she had given the kidney stone patient before the helicopter arrived. With a tired sigh, she walked into the medication room. The Pyxis machine waited exactly where she'd left it. She placed her scarred thumb against the glowing scanner. Access denied. Please try again. The familiar electronic chime sounded almost sarcastic. Bridget stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was a short, exhausted laugh that hovered somewhere between amusement and tears. She rested her forehead against the cool metal of the machine. Only hours earlier, she had coordinated a rooftop trauma response, stabilized a critically injured patient, and helped save a young man's life under impossible circumstances. Yet she still couldn't convince a medication dispenser to recognize her fingerprint. She wiped her thumb on the bright cartoon scrub top, took one slow breath, and tried again. Sometimes the strongest people carry the quietest burdens. The people who speak the least often have survived the most. Bridget never needed recognition from the staff around her. She only needed to be ready when someone else's worst day arrived. Because when everything else fell apart, that was when she did her best work.